how did you convey your needs? If you can't talk or communicate, how did you convey your needs? Or was there any kind of communication that you came up with Keith and Tom on your own while you were being held captive?
No, there was no conveyance of needs. It was, they gave us water and they gave us food, and they built these little boxes that they locked us in, and that was it. We were just being, we were just packages. They wanted to keep us alive. So they fed us. They gave us water. They would let us take a bath, but they would let us out of the boxes during daylight hours. But at night, they would lock us in the boxes.
What were these boxes like?
So it was really rough milled wood, and these guys are, for as much distaste, as much as I can't stand them because of what they do. They're very adaptive to their surroundings, and they can take a chainsaw and just by hand mill wood. They'll take a tree down and they'll mill wood, and I'm talking like 1 inch, thick tablets, maybe thicker, strong tablets. You couldn't break through them, and they made boxes out of those boards, and so that was their way of securing us at night. During the day, they would let us out, but at night, we slept inside of it.
How big were these boxes?
So they were tall enough. They were tall enough that you could stand up in, and wide enough that you could lay down in. And so, like maybe a 6x6 cube or a little less, 5x8 cube, in that range, you could stand up in it. And they were separated so we couldn't speak to each other. And surrounding these boxes, it was like a wooden fence enclosure. And we weren't allowed to leave that. And inside of it, they built this elevated platform, and they put a gigantic water container on top of it. And they would use a gas-powered water pump that they brought down. They connected it to the river, and they would fill this water tank up, and was our water source. And so we would use that for drinking water. We would use that to rinse off, take a bath. And so that was our confinement. It was this small area, 3 boxes separated by a little bit of distance. So we were all within the same enclosure, but we couldn't, it wasn't like we could be near each other. We couldn't speak to each other. My concern with this thing though was that big water tank. It was elevated. It was huge. It probably held 500 gallons, 300 gallons, something like that. It's a type of big tank you would see. On back in the day, you would see them on apartment building roofs, and that's what created, water pressure. So this thing was elevated, and the jungle was dense and it was thick. But the location that they had us in, there was a couple of breaks in the trees, and every night I would hear an airplane doing a search pattern that we used to do back in the day. Just if we had a target that we didn't know where the location was, we'd be tasked with a search area, and we would fly a certain pattern trying to find something. And I would say it was 4 or 5 nights in a row that I would hear an airplane overhead doing a search pattern. And I was wondering, and I never found this out, but I was wondering if it was our sister airplane. Our program, we had 2 airplanes set up the same exact way. And I used to think, man, that might be our guys, and my program, that might be them looking for us, because that's the way we would do this. And I used to look at that water tank, and I used to say, man, I think I could find this camp. If I was flying, I think I could see this camp, because that water tank, once you hit it with an infrared sensor, it would light up like a big light bulb. The water being cooler than everything else around it, that would be a strong indicator. And so, I was like, we might get discovered here,
So there's that hope again.
Yep, there's that hope. And so one evening, we're locked in our boxes, and I hear the airplane doing its search pattern again, but then I hear other airplanes approaching, and they had a totally different sound. And then we heard jets, and man, just out of nowhere, they started dropping bombs. And I'm close to us. I was sure they had found our camp, but they thought it was a FARC. They didn't know hostages were there. They thought it was a terrorist camp, and they started dropping bombs. And man, I had never been in any scenario like that, where you're in the jungle, someone's bombing you. It was surreal in a way, because first of all, the jungle is never quiet, right? There's so many animals, there's so many bugs, there's a constant shrill, there's a constant noise going on, crickets, there's all kinds of stuff happening at all times. But when the bombs drop, you hear the explosion. It's hard, you could feel it. And then you could hear the repercussion of the bomb, you know, the sound wave go through, rustling through the leaves of the trees, and everything goes silent for about a nanosecond, half a second. Everything goes quiet, and then it comes back to noise again. And this bombing run went on, man, again, you know, distorted time when you're getting bombed, but it felt like an hour, hour and a half.
How close was this to you? How close was the bombing? And because we skipped a few things. We skipped a few things that I want to go back and touch on. How close was the bombing?
So I'll put it this way, because I was in a box. I couldn't see anything.
So
I'd never been bombed before.
So the box didn't have any way that you could see out of it?
No.
It was a completely enclosed box that you were locked in.
It was a box. It had a door that was chained shut.
So again, 6x8, boxed in, locked inside of this thing, and there's bombs going off around you, and you can feel them. What's it feel like when you feel the bomb?
No, it's just, well, you know, I talked about being too stunned to be terrified in the beginning. Well, dude, I was terrified, man. I was just thinking I was for sure we were going to get hit. You know, and I was just wondering, how good is their aim? You know, because if their aim is on, we're toast. You could feel the explosion. It's loud. Then you hear the repercussions going through the trees, but I couldn't see anything, you know, and I really don't know how close they were to us. I'll say this, man, it was way closer than I wanted, man. And it went on for way longer than I wanted. And I was terrified in the beginning. And I remember shouting out to the guards. I was like, and through Tom House, if we don't get moved, we're dying here. We're all gonna die here if we don't get moved out of these boxes. Move us out of here. And there was no way. But I'll tell you this, they were terrified as well. I mean, I heard a few of them throwing up. They were vomiting. That's how scared they were. They, meaning the terrorists, the guards. They were scared. And I was too. Until, you know, I finally, like, I realized that there's nothing I can do. So again, I prayed again. And again, man, and I don't know why God listens to me, but I asked if we could be spared from the bombing. And I asked for if those airplanes could just go away, man. And the feeling I had was, I was laying in this box, you know, on the floor of it, and kind of curled up in a fetal position, and I just felt like somebody did this to me, like I was in someone's hands. And eventually the airplanes went away, and you know, I'm lucky in the sense, not because I survived that, but I'm lucky because I got to see God's work, you know. So, you know, people that are watching this, you know, a lot of people don't know who God is. They don't know he exists. I get to know that because I got to see, like with my own eyes, I got to see. So it's easy for someone like me to have faith. After that happened, they moved us out of that camp, and they force marched us again.
One more question I wanted. You spoke about the water being pumped from the river. Now, how far in is this when you get to this camp? How far in, and how much time did you spend there?
Yeah, so that was right after that first 27-day march, after the meeting with the bosses in Monohoihoi. They moved us into a temporary camp that we were there for only about 4 or 5 days. We actually named it, if you read the book, we called it Monkey Village. And we called it Monkey Village because there was always monkeys going overhead. There was a lot of monkeys there. That place that they had us in was used to hold a large group of hostages before. And we knew that because we could see where the people were chained to, and we just saw artifacts that were left behind from other hostages. And so, you know, we started to figure out, man, this is business for them. Holding hostages is business for these guys. But they moved us out of Monkey Village into this new camp where the boxes were. And by the time the bombing came around, it was probably 2 months.
So during this time period, we're talking about a little over 3 months, maybe 4 months.
Right.
This is early in this journey. Were you sick? You're drinking river water. Like did like the food, and I don't even know what you're eating yet. We've missed a few things, and we're not going to be able to get into every detail now. And I hope that in the future that our viewers will get a chance to, possibly send in their own questions about your life, because you got a lot to answer. Like this is an incredible story. But were you sick? Like, did the food make you sick? And of course, you're still dealing with injuries.
Yeah. So no, it's a good point, because the water, the water was just river water. It was brown, and so we were all sick. Keith he had it worse than Tom and I. I mean, he was just vomiting. He was like bad diarrhea, like he was pissing out of his ass. It was bad for him. And man, one of the things we came to discover is when you get ill, sometimes their remedy is worse than the sickness itself. So with Keith, interestingly enough, they didn't want him to get sick and die. They wanted us alive. And so they tried to resolve his stomach issues. And it wasn't by giving us clean water or giving us medicine. They strapped him upside down, man. They basically tied him upside down to a tree, forced him, and then they tied like a tourniquet around his waist. And man, it was like a form of torture, man. They said that would resolve his diarrhea and stomach issues.
I'm completely confused. They tied him upside down to a tree, or from a tree.
Yeah. And then they tied a tourniquet around his waist. A tight tourniquet. That's the only way I can describe it. And
this was their medical solution to diarrhea.
That was, it was torture in a crazy, maybe they intended that to be torture, but they said that was going to help his stomach.